a short video to show some modifications that can be made to Hobby King's EPP FPV to help mount the camera, make it fly a bit better, and make it a bit more durable. So let's start. These are little hooks that I've attached to the fuselage on each side so that it's easy to attach elastic to it and mount a camera on the nose or here. To do so, I used a tiny piece of plywood, cut out a little piece of foam, ran a wire hook through the plywood and glued it in place with epoxy. In this way there's a really sturdy attachment point. Similar attachment points were positioned underneath the wing, outer edge of the wing actually, one on each side. This moves the camera far from the ESC so that there's minimal electronic interference. This mounting point can be used to mount a small camera such as a Turnigy DV52 or a keychain camera. Mounting one under each wing makes sure that the lateral balance is not affected. The next modification is this transparent piece of plastic that I mounted on the back of the fuselage. I just taped it on there with some elastic tape, electrical tape actually. I glued a popsicle stick underneath my servo rings to give it some rigidity. And the reason for this is during landing on the snow I found that my servos get wet, and this keeps the servos dry, and this little popsicle stick prevents anything from catching on the servo rings during the landing. Also, each little ring on the spar back here, or this tube rather, was protected with a tiny piece of wood so that it won't hit anything during the landing. This was epoxied to the carbon fiber tube and soaked with CA to give it some strength. I have found that since I've done that, these tail structures do not get any damage during landing. While we're back here, the motor I used is the Turnigy 3536 1400 kilovolt. This gives plenty of power for the airplane. The prop is a 10x5 APC. And I found that that gives plenty of power and seems to provide good run times. I use Turnigy's 3-cell, it's actually Zippy I think, or Light Max, 2200 milliamp hour batteries, two of them in parallel to provide 4400 milliamps in total. That provides more than 20 minutes of flying time. You slide them to the very front of the nose. They fit in here beautifully. There's a bit of a friction fit component, but I did position a piece of foam back here to prevent them from sliding back into the fuselage and upsetting the center of gravity during flight. Next, I'd like to show the modifications that I made to the canopy parts. You need a bit of nose weight anyway. This is an FPV type of airplane designed to carry a bit of weight in the front so that the airplane is tail heavy. If you're going to fly it without a camera, you have to mount your batteries in the nose to get some weight in here, and you have to add a bit of weight. So I made a little cutout here and put some lead strips in here to provide the necessary counterweight for a 100 millimeter center of gravity balance. Then I made a second cutout on the bottom piece of the canopy to make my batteries fit. They stick out a little bit. And on top of that I made a deeper slot because I found, depending on the camera that I use, I have to transfer some of this lead into this cavity here to keep the center of gravity in the right position. Next, I'd like to provide a quick overview of the different cameras that I've used for those who are still looking for something useful. This one is Sony's Webby. It's a true HD camera and has a swivel lens, so you can point it down or wherever you like. It's a HD camera that shoots really good video. It uses Sony's Pro Duo card, and I've got a 16 gig card in mine, which seems to work well. I just use a little bit of wire to make an attachment harness for it, mounted on a piece of foam to take any vibration away, and it's attached with elastic to also help with the vibration issue. It seems to work really well. I can point it down a bit so you get some good video during flight. When this camera is used, it doesn't add much weight to the aircraft. There's 18 grams of difference in weight between this camera and this weighted part of the canopy. So when I take this off, it adds 18 grams of weight to the nose and almost no weight to the aircraft as a whole. There doesn't seem to be any change in the center of gravity, and the aircraft flies beautifully with the camera mounted. The second camera that I've used is this one. This is Kodak M1093. It's a cheap little pocket camera, but it shoots HD video, which is really nice. It's mounted in a plywood box. suspended in foam, once again to get rid of any vibration issues, and it's just attached with Velcro, easy to remove. There's a servo in here which is used to take stills, and it can turn on or turn off the video in flight if necessary. The other cameras I've experimented with it work well are these. The typical keychain camera that's sold on eBay for about 15 bucks or so. I use bicycle inner tube to mount them. It's really easy to slide these sleeves on or off, and I use elastic to mount it. You can mount it to any part of the aircraft that way. These two are from Hobby King. This is the Turnigy DV52, and I've mounted wider angle lenses on. These lenses are also from eBay. They're really cheap, about I think about $5 to $10 each. This one is a 0.67 wide angle lens, and this one is a 0.28 wide angle lens. The angle on this is really wide, but you do get a little bit of edge distortion. On this one, the angle is much wider than the camera alone, and there's no distortion. This is a really neat little lens for it. These little cameras do not shoot HD video, but they do 30 frames a second and give fairly good video quality. They're very light and extremely useful for this type of application. In terms of weight, I'm going to use this little scale to weigh them, just to give you an idea. The keychain camera weighs about 18 grams. With the wide angle lens, the DV52 weighs approximately 39 grams. The Kodak M1093 in its housing is 204 grams. And finally, the Sony Webby is 115 grams. So in total, I have flown the aircraft actually with all of these cameras mounted on at one time, this little group here. Flying it with this camera alone doesn't add any nose weight. The all-up flying weight of my aircraft, with its 2 batteries and setup as is here, with the nose weight, etc., the all-up weight is 1.58 kilograms, or 3 pounds 8 ounces. When I add the Webby camera right here, it adds 18 grams to the total flight setup. Almost no real change in weight. With all 4 cameras mounted onto the airplane, the all-up weight is 1.82 kilograms. Now that's a substantial increase over the base weight, but the aircraft doesn't seem to fly any different at that weight, and in fact lands possibly even a bit easier because the glide path is a bit more solid. The last item that I'd like to share is the fact that I fly the aircraft now with flaperons down all the time. There you see the angle that I use. It's a minute angle, but it changes the flight characteristics very nicely. The airplane has a slower stall speed, is very gentle on landing, and if I want to overfly an object of interest, I can do so very slowly without risking a stall. The only thing that you have to watch for is that at very slow flying speeds the ailerons become less sensitive, and I found that mixing 70% rudder with the ailerons, the control authority remains positive during slow flight, and landing and slow flight is very predictable. In all, I'd like to say that my experience with this airplane has been extremely positive. I think Hobby King has a winner. Personally, I'm not into FPV flying, but for those of you who are interested in it, there's a huge cavity here to mount equipment. Obviously this plane can carry a lot of weight without any real worry. I'm going to try and mount mine onto floats to fly it off water just for fun, and I'm sure you can add landing gear without much trouble. This is a winner and a highly recommended airplane.